Well, here we are again to another broadcast of mindyourhealthcast.com. It's nice that if you haven't been bored to total trance or deep sleep by now, then you may be able to make it through this third session of things to be done without drugs to improve your mental emotional state and to function well in our world today. I realize it's very difficult because we live in a very stressful world, and many of the things that we have talked about and will be talking about are going to be dealing with stress. And there's a lot of good things out there. It's just sometimes it's overwhelming, and I'm in the process of putting together a course. I've been thinking about this for a while in modules that will be on DVD along with study material and recommended books that will give you enough background to pick something that you could do for yourself, or if you feel it's beyond yourself, to find someone who could utilize the technique with you and help you to get through some of your issues. We live in probably one of the most stressful periods that has existed in a long time, as far as emotional and not specific stress. In other words, there was a time when you were starving, that was a big stress, but once you could find something to eat, then everything else wasn't bad. But in our world today, there's just so many issues that we're dealing with. Many of them we don't even give it a thought as being a stressor, but is in fact a big stressor. And I mentioned the Heart Math Institute before, had some very good material called the M-Wave machine, and that is a way you can train to correct that stress. And at any rate, we're going to go through some of the final things. This could have easily been 4 sessions. 3 is enough, I think, and I will make available this program that you could buy, and we'll want to keep it at a reasonable price to help you maybe do some of the things on your own and at least be better equipped how to look for something. Now, you may be able, if you wanted to, even do the 3 DVDs that will be available on this drugless and self-help series that we're doing right now. You remember we said if you can't take the drugs, what can you do? And what can you do is there's a lot of stuff. Probably in my whole life, I've seen a lot of things happen, come and go, and there's just a lot of new things, new technologies. I would say that I've probably sampled most of them. I've utilized them with people who come to see me, the patients that I deal with. I've recommended a lot of things, a lot of books, but we're going to put that all together in a concise program, and then after that, as I say, it will equip you. You'll know, okay, here's my issues, and this sounds good for me, because all of these people get benefits from, or I wouldn't even be talking about it, but some people relate better to certain things than they do others. So at any rate, we're going to kind of lay some of this out and see what you think about it. Now remember, we started out by talking about psychiatry and what had happened to it over the years. It got into the drugs, and pretty soon nobody's solving problems. We just throw on Band-Aids, and when that Band-Aid is leaking and doesn't work anymore, we throw on a different kind of Band-Aid. And we just continue doing that until finally that looked like we're killing people. And we are. Or we're permanently injuring them. In some of the books that we've mentioned, there's case after case where there are people, and even teenagers, are permanently impaired because of having taken some of these very powerful psychoactive drugs. I told you Dr. Peter Breggin wrote a book called Toxic Psychiatry, which is an extremely good book, and he tells why you should do the therapy and get the people well, not throw on the Band-Aids because of all the problems. And what he has been saying for several years now is now coming to pass, that we're seeing people have terrible, terrible problems from these psychiatric drugs. And besides that, the person still is left with their original problem. So What we wanted to do then was to make you aware that there were some alternatives that even psychiatrists could use if they chose to, but a lot of them don't choose to because it takes less time and is more profitable for them just to write a prescription and have you out the door. Psychotherapy does take time. It takes probably 5 to 6 times as long per session to do some psychotherapy than it does to prescribe you a drug. So he can see one patient in about an hour doing psychotherapy and could see 5 or 6 by doing the prescriptions, and sometimes more depending on how smooth the visit is. It may only be a few minutes and you're in and out with your new prescription, or you're at least renewing the prescription if the psychiatrist is feeling, yeah, we're covering it over pretty good with this. In the long run, there are complications, and we did talk about those. And so the psychiatrist, if they wanted to do the therapies, there's a lot out there that is very effective, and people get well. They don't just get band-aided or covered up. But on the other hand, if you don't have insurance that pays for it, and you don't have a tremendous amount of money, and you're not even sure what therapist may or may not do it, there's, as I say, a lot of self-help things, and unless you're really non-functional emotionally, psychologically, you can utilize these very effectively. So one of the first ones we're going to talk about today is probably, it's been around a while, called the release technique. And the release technique was developed by a physicist by the name of Lester Levinson. Now, we'll have books showing on the website relating to these things, because I know you're going to have a hard time either knowing what I said or getting it written down while we're talking, and may want to know. So all of these things, we will put up books that relate to these. But Lester Levinson was a physicist and had a very bad heart attack. He went along for a while with that heart attack, and then he had a really, really bad one. And the really, really bad one, they said, really nothing we can do. You maybe have a week or two, or at the most a few weeks, but there's nothing more we can do. That's it. And at that point, he sat down and had a talk with himself, and he said, now wait a minute. Now medicine says there's nothing more they can do. I'm a physicist. I understand science. I understand a lot of things. Why can't I do something for myself? And so he did. He set out to study a lot about, pretty fast because he didn't have a lot of time, how the mind works and the emotions and how it affects the body. And he got into it on his own. He decided to develop a way of getting rid of this tension, because really what it had gotten down to, it was life stresses had beaten him up so badly that his body couldn't take it anymore. So he went through this process of developing a system which he called the release technique. And the whole idea of it was that you end up using your imagination and understanding physiology, a way to vent the stress out of your body. You would get into something that was very stressful. You could feel the stress in your body, and then you would release it out. And you didn't need any tools or anything. It would work pretty good. In fact, it worked so good that not only did he recover, but he lived many, many years after that. And as far as I know, he didn't even die of a cardiac problem. Anyhow, after all of that, because he got rid of that stress that was beating him up. Now, if you get into the physiology of stress, you would understand what he's talking about, and he talks a good bit about it in his material that he wrote. And so it worked very good, and over a period of time, there were some other people, I guess maybe he started teaching it, and so they picked up some material from him and decided to develop a takeoff on it, which, as I mentioned before, happens. And there's really hardly anything that's original anymore. Pretty much everything is bringing together or looking at in a different way or tweaking something so that you, sometimes it's just because you think you can do it a little better, and sometimes you're thinking, how can I use what this guy's discovered and make a name for myself, but don't give him credit for it, or if I do, kind of give played down credit, and then appear like I found something new. So it seems to me that something called the Sedona method came out of this release technique. And I'm not saying that to be negative to the Sedona method or put it down, and I've known several people who felt they got very good results with it. But it's kind of based on the same idea that you're releasing or letting go of this stuff. And in the long run, basically, that's extremely therapeutic. If you are doing psychotherapy with somebody, you're bringing up this stuff and you're sometimes changing the way you look at it or how you let it affect you, and you get rid of it. So whichever technique works very well is good. So there's books on the Sedona method that you can get. They didn't call it a technique, they called it the Sedona method. There's used to be cassettes. I have to watch sometimes, I'll say tapes or cassettes, because for years and years I went through hundreds and hundreds of cassettes and so forth. But now we've gotten into a little bit higher technology with the CDs. And so there's CD and DVD programs out there on a lot of this. And so on this Sedona method, there is some CDs, and usually there's always CDs, DVDs, and some kind of workbook because you're applying it to you. And so it cannot tell you what to do for your problem because it doesn't specifically, because it doesn't know your problem, although sometimes there are commonalities or problems between people. So what they do with the workbooks are they have you start dealing with your specific issues. And so it becomes a good way of helping yourself. And I've had people who said, you know, I was really sick and had a lot of problems and just terrible things until I ran into this method. So whether it was the Lester Levinson method, or whether it was which is called the release technique, or whether it was the Sedona method, which they just call it the Sedona method, but they say it releases all of these stresses out of your body, and they do store up. Sometimes because of what you know, and sometimes of what you don't know. Now, what can happen in self-therapy is, as you deal with things you are aware of and know something about, then in the process of releasing that, other things will surface, just like in homeopathic medicine. I've told people before that your body stores up a history of everything that happens to it. And it's hard for anything to happen to the emotions that do not in some way affect your body. So that if over time you have built this hierarchy, or a, we could call it a garbage pile, of all these different layers, then when we're going to help you get well, we start with the most recent, which you are aware of, and we start moving backward, cleaning your body out. I just used to tell people, it reminded me of a cassette tape, that you have recorded everything that's gone on in your health and body over the years, and at the time you come to see me, you have gotten so much on there that your body's having difficulty dealing with it. And so all we do is we play the tape backwards, erasing a section at a time until we've taken you all the way back to the beginning. And we don't have to have you keep coming in and in and in to get it all done, because I found out a long time ago that even after you're not seeing me anymore, the body, once it's freed up of this garbage, the heavy stuff that's on the top, it will continue on its own to correct itself. So periodically you'll notice old symptoms will temporarily pop up of an old problem you had 10 years ago, 20 years ago. One lady called one day and said, I just had a few chicken pox popped up on my body, and it had been 2 years since I had seen her. And she said, that tells me that I'm back to about 6 years old, because that's how old I was when I originally had the chicken pox. So if you just think of the emotions in the same way, sometimes the old beginning problems we're not aware of anymore, don't even remember, but they're in there, and they're in the stack of garbage. And so we start with where we are now. Okay, I have this phobia. Every time I get out in the open, I start to panic. Or when I get in a tight place, I start to panic. Or when I see a dog, I start to panic. whatever it is that this trigger, you start where you are now and you can work your way backwards, and pretty soon, as I say, as you take off the top of the garbage pile, some of the deeper will come up to the surface. Almost like the old Pez man, you know. I don't know if you remember those little Pez candies in a little container. Well, when you open the lid, which was usually in the shape of an animal head or a clown or something, the spring pushed up into the next Pez, and when you took that out, then another one would come up. You take that out, another would come up. And it's kind of like that in getting your body corrected. You've got all this stored in here, in your body, and now most people just maybe have trouble with that, thinking, wow, how could all that stuff just keep storing up in my body? But it does. I've done almost 40 years of clinical work, and I've watched it happen over and over with person after person. So much so that I know that it's a fact, that that's what happens. And so once you hit a critical point where you've taken out enough that the body can take over on its own, it will. Because we have a built-in homeostatic system that's designed to bring us back into balance. And unless something inhibits that, it works. But what can happen is prolonged stress can start overworking parts of the body, start shutting down your coping capability until finally one day you're in big trouble. And then, of course, if you decided to go to traditional medicine and take a lot of drugs every time a symptom came up, you keep putting layers of physical garbage as well as emotional garbage in, and so you have kind of a compound pile of toxic material, emotional and physiological, meaning pesticides, herbicides, food additives, food preservatives, all of these chemicals that we have, solvents, dyes, you name it, whatever it is, these chemicals can have an inhibiting effect in the body, worse for certain people than other people, because everybody is very individualistic. And our genetic is individualistic, and our epigenetic is individualistic. So when you bring these all together, every person is quite unique. Just as we look very unique, even identical twins are not 100% identical, but kind of close, kind of mirror images, but not down the line exactly 100%. Then the same with people in general. We're all human beings, but we have come from different backgrounds, different ethnic groups, different regions of the world, different exposures in our ancestry as well as ourselves. And when you bring all this together, then everybody is one unique individual. And a program that's effective is going to have to deal with the fact that you are an individual and you can't have a standard protocol for anything. Medicine has done that because it made it simple for the doctor. Well, if you come in with arthritis, here's our protocol. If you come in with migraine headache, here's our protocol. And so they have standard protocols. So once in a while, somebody gets some help benefit. A lot of times they don't, because it was not geared to you. It was geared to a generalization of you, a composite of 100 or 1,000 U's or even 10,000 U's. And so it's not the same for you, because you're still going to be different. No matter how many people are similar, you're going to be unique, and what you need is going to be unique over what someone else needs. That's why, in a way, self-therapy is extremely good, because that is designed to help you, because it's coming from you. And you know you better than anyone else knows you as a rule. Now, as I say, there are some things can be covered over, either by repression, which means it was done automatically, or suppression, that you did it yourself a long time ago because it was not something you wanted to face or deal with, or it seemed too painful at the time, so you push it back and you keep it back in the background. What I'm saying is, though, as you let go of this stuff, those older things are going to start to surface, and what you may find that what you know and where you've matured to today, what upsets you 30 years ago doesn't really upset you that much anymore. Once you really get it out in the open and look at it, you say, well, that's ridiculous. That was so trivial. Why did I have all these problems all these years over something that trivial? But that's how you're perceiving it now, not how you perceived it 30 years ago. It was very scary at that time, not so scary now. You've learned a lot more, you've had to deal with the world a lot more, you've had better coping capabilities and so forth, so now it is not a big issue. And so it loses its power. And there's all kinds of things you can do with it, and I think it works extremely well. Now, we talked about the energy medicine idea, and in a sense these fall within that area because you're thinking of negative energies in the form of stress energies that you release out of your body and get rid of. Now, following in the footsteps of Lester Levinson, and actually knew him quite well, studied with him, and he himself, who almost committed suicide at the peak of his financial career, he walked out on his penthouse in New York on the balcony, looked down, and was prepared to jump off. But he was financially successful, had more money than he could spend. He lived in the best place in New York, a very expensive penthouse. He had everything except something inside didn't feel right. And he came that close to going over the edge until he said, now wait a minute. What good reason do I have to do that? I have really achieved what I set out to achieve. I have money that I am not stressed over money, but something was bugging him inside. So anyhow, he found out about Lester Levinson, and out of that, corrected himself, became a very happy person. And so he started teaching and writing about it, wrote a book called the Abundance Book, is what it was called, because he applied it to becoming successful financially, but doing that by releasing and getting rid of all your garbage. And so it was really based on this release technique, which he thought was extremely good and that everybody ought to know about. Now, he likewise developed some CDs and some study material to do the same thing under his abundance course based on the release technique. And so he started teaching it. He's written about it. There's books about it. We'll mention the major book that I just mentioned to you. But very good material. So you have Lawrence Crane, and you have who studied with Levinson, and Lawrence's material is very good. As far as I know, he's still alive. I think he's out in California, and he still is living the abundant life. Became also very successful financially, as well as gotten rid of all, and on and on. In other words, he even carried it even farther. But he also got rid of all this garbage that was not allowing him to be happy in light of all the things that he had achieved. And so he got rid of the stress, and he used this same technique called the release technique. Now, in recent years, taking this same idea and taking some other things that we talked about, I've thrown you a tremendous amount of material. I am working on integrating it all together so that instead of your view of the world being like this, your view of the world is like this. We want to keep expanding, and I think expansion to me is growing, and of course contraction is shrinking inward, downward, and not so healthy. So you want to expand, you want to be more aware, you want to be more aware of yourself, you want to be more aware of the world, you want to improve your capability to cope or to handle the things that you deal with, and you change your perspective. It's not so important anymore. Maybe at one time not being seen with no makeup on could be devastating to some people. But as time goes on, they begin to realize, we know the world goes on, and people aren't going to turn away from you. And in the long run, what did it amount to, whether or not you had makeup on or not? I mean, it's nice to be looking nice and well kept, but your perspective about what becomes so important. Some people said that's why older people can become more themselves and be more outspoken about everything, is because it's not so important anymore. They don't really care what people think about them. They don't have to impress anybody. And so it relieves a whole set of anxiety problems just by being yourself. And so in a sense, we kind of tend toward being therapeutic just by maturing, and that process of having gone through a lot of things in the world and realizing that none of them destroyed you, because here you are. You survived them all, and at the time it may have looked like the darkest time in your life, but now here you are, you survived it, and you're still here, and things aren't so bad. So what happens with expanding in general your awareness is that's what you do. You gain a new perspective of the world. You know more about it. Things seem less fearful, less important, and what becomes important is how you feel and those people that you love and deal with, how that all goes, as opposed to, well, did I make a good impression on that person? Or this, will they never care for me again because they saw that I wasn't dressed for the right occasion, or all those things that people worry so much about, all of a sudden isn't so important anymore. So anyhow, we had talked about the fact of the different regions of the brain, and I'm going to tie that in with Lawrence Crane and Lester Levinson. There was a researcher who was into brain function and physiology, and he knew, as we mentioned earlier, about the frontal lobes of the brain being the executive center of the brain, and that there's a left prefrontal and a right prefrontal, and interestingly, they're not quite the same in the way they deal with things. The one that, the left prefrontal became the one that when they studied these meditators who meditated for years and finally got into a state of joy and a state of high-level awareness, which is sometimes referred to as mindfulness, that these people were activating, because they actually measured the brain waves, they were activating the left prefrontal lobe of the executive part of the brain. Now, the executive is that conscious thinking part that we have control of. So those people can train themselves to access this on an ongoing basis, so it's not just once in a while we have this peak experience, but it's every day is a peak experience. So at any rate, we mentioned that the right prefrontals are tied into the amygdala, hippocampus, memory, emotional portion of the brain, and to the sensory input coming in as it affects the amygdala and the hippocampus. So, more of the negative, stressful, problematic things are brought into play when we actually center on this side of our consciousness and saying, gee, I wonder what would happen if, or maybe I might lose my job, or what happens if somebody doesn't like me, or what happens if I break my leg, or what happens if I can't pay my house payment anymore. What would happen if a meteor hit the Earth and half of the people on the Earth were killed in one big collision? What would happen if an airplane crashed into me? And you get this stuff all going, and so all the sensory input coming in and triggering the amygdala, hippocampus, you perceive that as maybe a threat. Maybe that means somebody is really out to get me, or maybe it means this, and maybe it means that. And so you get all this stuff going in that right prefrontal, and some people tend to get kind of fixated there. And so they're the naysayers, that everything in the world is wrong. They're certainly not the positive thinkers, they're the negative thinkers. And they have a negative expectation that something bad is going to happen. Unfortunately, my dad was a worrier, and he was in that left or the right prefrontal, I'd say a good share of the time. And so he always would have something he was worried about or that could happen. You know, and now you can't go run track at school because you might trip and fall and you might hurt yourself. And therefore, you shouldn't go and run track. And so everything was a problem. And on occasion, when there was nothing present he could think of to worry about, he worried about the fact there was probably something impending that he didn't know about, that if he did know he could worry about, but he didn't know, so he worried because he didn't know what it was he could worry about. Anyhow, it made him pretty miserable and made him have a lot of problems in his life, and I've known many, many people like that. And that's where cognitive therapy, as we mentioned earlier, is like a new way of looking at the same set of circumstances and in a less stressful, disturbing way. So at any rate, this person who did all this research wondered if there's one spot on the head related to the right prefrontal area that could tell you when you're being bugged by something very stressful, by the brainwave pattern, and what could you do then to access that easily? And then if you applied some therapeutic or some improvement technique, could this then tell you if it was successful? And so what he did is he took Lester Levinson, Lawrence Crane's ideas and what he knew about the physiology of the brain and the anatomy of the brain. And so he ultimately came up with a device that is a miniature EEG. Miniature EEG means that it's just measuring one part of the brain, not the whole brain, as they normally would do with an EEG. They would put electrodes all over the whole scalp. So what he found is that right in the center, between the hairline and the top of the eyebrow, about a ½ inch from the center line, there is a spot that if you put an EEG electrode, one single electrode, on that spot, and of course you have to have two connections to make an electrical circuit. So you put one electrode on that spot, which is a gold-plated electrode, and you put a gold-plated electrode on your earlobe, and you have this tiny EEG unit that is actually a transmitter too, and you put the headband on and put it there, and it feeds the information into a receiver in your computer and brings up an EEG on the screen of the computer showing the baseline effect on that area of the brain. And so he found that when you had something negative that was a problem or problematic and you thought about it and you hooked up to this EEG measuring only the right prefrontal lobe of the brain, you would get a high level reading on the EEG. In other words, it's highly activated. Then he would apply this technique called the release technique, and when it was successful, and it's a thought process you go through, and when it's successful, you would notice a change in how you felt, and you would see the brain wave pattern drop down to a lower level, more at ease reading. And so just by not, instead of having to go through this big expensive process of going and having it monitored by a mammoth brainwave that could do 20, 30, 40 channels of the brain, he could get it just with this one electrode on the right prefrontal. And the people felt better. It worked well. He did research. It took him 15 years of research to come up with this process. And it's kind of simple. It's just called the ICAP. And I've worked with it, and it does work. As I say, pretty much all the things that I talk about, I have utilized it to a degree myself to see, number one, if I thought it did work and how it affected me. So, with a very simple EEG feedback, which again, we talked earlier about biofeedback, it worked very well in getting rid of this material. So consequently, you could do the release technique a lot faster because you were knowing when you were hitting the effect rather than just going through the process and kind of depending on how you felt to be the sole criteria. This could give you good information right away because biofeedback always is very helpful in giving you immediate feedback, which is then helping you to get rid of a problem fast. And that's why biofeedback could train you to relax faster, to relax a particular muscle, to change your body temperature, change your brain waves, change your general stress level. All these things you could do by learning how to do it with some kind of feedback, as opposed to just mentally thinking, well, I seem to have been affected with it, but maybe I should go on more anyhow because I'm not sure if I was. And, you know, as you change, your perception changes, and so then I've had people come in and tell me, you know, I don't think your therapy is helping. I don't think I'm any better than I was. And so I could give them a questionnaire that they originally filled out when they came in, or sometimes I would just call their attention to certain things. And I'd say, well, when you came in, you said you had this. And they would look at me with that look and think, yeah, that's right, I did have that, and I don't have that anymore. And then we could do that with 2, 3, 4, 5 things, and they say, oh, well, I guess I am getting better. There's a thing about the human being is that when you get away from a problem, it tends to kind of fall away the remembrance that you had the problem. And so it's a good idea, and there are some doctors that every few visits they will have you fill out this questionnaire, a long questionnaire, and recalculate, how disturbed are you and in what areas. And so many times they think, oh wow, yeah, I don't have that anymore. But it's like we rapidly forget that we had the problem once it's not bugging us anymore. So this is a very good system. The downside of this is that it probably, I don't know if you can get it, I bought it when it first came out. They had a very special introductory price to people who are already into Lawrence Crane, or Larry Crane, he preferred to be called, into his work. And they had a very special price they worked out on it. Since then, and the regular price, I understand, is probably about $2,200 to $2,500 for the computer program, the wireless receiver that plugs into the computer, and the wireless unit and transmitter that you wear on your head to do the process. You still can do the release process without this, but with the technology, and that's the whole thing about technology, and that's why I kind of get excited about technology. The whole thing about it is it can speed the process up tremendously, because now you're seeing a change, and seeing that is a convincer that you're changing, which reinforces the process and makes it go even faster. So that's why I'm telling you all that, and that's what biofeedback does. Once you're getting feedback and you're looking at an objective source that is telling you, yeah, you were here to begin with, and now you're not there, you're here. And you say, wow, I am making change, which is giving you a better attitude and reinforces changing faster. Just so you understand a little bit about the technology, it's not just a bunch of gimmicks and gadgets. These are things that help you to make change. So, very good procedure, but might be a little expensive. I think the original introductory price was like $800 or $900, but that was only about probably about a third of what it was at regular retail. I haven't looked into it recently. I might do that and find out. If I find out it is available and at the special price, I will post it on one of my web pages, and it will be available for those who might want something of that nature. Now, it works very good. And does a good job getting rid of all these problems. I mentioned the M-Wave before, which is very good, and that likewise helps get rid of a lot of problems. It's a little bit different biofeedback approach, but it's using the other brain, which is the heart, as the primary monitor or indicator of effects. And that was using heart rate variability, which has to do with minor arrhythmias of the heart or incoherence of the heartbeat. And when you had a positive effect, it would go into a coherent state. And then all kinds of good health benefits, emotionally and physically, can accrue from that. So both of those are good. The M-Way is going to be a lot less money. It's around $250 to $300. That is either on or probably will be before the weekend's over on my website. Heart Math is on there. And if you go to the website and click Heart Math, it will take you to it, and you can find the M-Wave and other things that they have that can be very, very beneficial for self-help, including about the emotions and weight, some of the work they've done with that, and that I've incorporated in this new weight loss program that I put together that we're getting ready to actually release. We've done a little bit of talk about it, but it's a very good program, and this one is aimed at not only helping you get it off, but to keep it off, because you're dealing with some of those emotional features or factors that have been helping keep you there. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is talk about the fact that what I consider is high-level development. Once you've gotten rid of some of the basic things that are problematic, you might want to move to a higher level of saying, okay, what is my real capacity, or what are my real capabilities? What is it like to really be on top? And so there's some things out there that I think are very good. First of all, you need to have good brain nutrition. Now, I've mentioned a doctor before I talked to. He has a book out. His name is Larry McCleary. He's an MD who is a pediatric neurosurgeon. And he's written a book called Feed Your Brain and Lose Your Gut, which is kind of catchy. And I've talked to him in person, and he had said, now I haven't verified it recently, that he would be willing to be interviewed on a program, and we'll probably do that because we're getting pretty close to the point we're going to start interviewing some people. And he's one that I was impressed with the work he's done, and his book is available. You can find it on the website. My website, don't forget my website is mindyourhealthcast.com. And that's the gateway to Alternative Health and Prevention, which is the clinic website, and it's the gateway to the broadcast. You can go directly from that site to the broadcast. And there's pages now of all kinds of information, healthy things you can get for water, for air, for self-protection, for nutrition. And we're adding some of the organic food sources that you can go to if you want to eat healthy. So I'm saying the nutrition for the brain is very important, so whatever you want to do, you want to feed your brain. And of course you want to do body exercises. We talked a lot about whole body vibration, which I'm convinced is one of the best things that you can invest such a little amount of time and a little amount of effort and get tremendous effects from. I've been using it for some time now. I think it's extremely effective. We have a page of it on the website. If you've missed it, you might want to look at that. So the diet, meaning you eat the right things. It's not a matter of just taking the right nutrients. And we're going to be giving some neurological brain recommendations. That there's actually a couple of products, one called Tranquility, which is for people under a lot of stress. There's another one that has to do with anti-aging, both of brain and body. But we're going to put together another special protocol for the brain for people who are really concerned. But it's not just the brain, it's the whole body and the brain. And if you want to really develop to a high level, improve your memory, improve your capabilities, have more clarity in your thinking and so forth, you definitely want to worry about the nutrition. And also, you also want to make sure that you drink good water. I mentioned that before. We've talked a lot about water, the whole concept of water. So these you need to do if you really want to move to a high level. And then there are some things you can do to go beyond that. And so one of the things that I found a long, long time ago, I had one of the very first ones that ever came out. They have become more and more sophisticated, less money, and more benefits. And those are the light sound machines. Now, I brought a couple along. There's several companies, and we have them on the website you can go to. And there's different ways that it's done. Now, what it amounts to, it's based on putting sound in your ears at a certain frequency. So you wear headphones, or music, which can be fed through the unit, or both, and a special set of glasses that have a LEDs built into them, and they either can go to specific frequencies or mixes of frequencies or alternating from one eye to the next. There's a lot of things that they can do, but what they can do is they can be put into programs. And so the units actually have built-in programs. You can, in many of them, they have the flexibility you can put in your own programs. They now have some recorded CDs of music that has encoding in it that will plug into these, and so the sound flashes will go with the encoding in the music, and so those are extremely helpful. Or you can just play good music you like, relaxing music by Yanni, some of these people that's very relaxing, Jeffrey Thompson, Daniel Goldberg. There's a pile of them out there that are extremely good. There's a lot of them that we've referred to on the website. Eldon Taylor's material. If you want to improve memory concentration, there's certain frequencies that enable your brain to learn and to remember better. And there's certain frequencies that help you relax better, to sleep better. to enhance your physical capabilities, such as in sports and so forth, better. There's all kind of combinations, and these are some of the things that we would do in this course I talked about. These modules that would take you step by step and introduce you to some of these and the resources for them, and a determination of where you want to go and what might be best for you. Now, there's two types of glasses of these machines. I have two different machines. One set is a dark glass that when you have it on, you don't see anything except the lights that are flashing. So I don't know if you can see how they look, but I didn't turn the flash on this. So this machine uses dark glasses, although most of the machines you can go either way with the glasses. And then the LEDs are all pretty much pure white. There are some exceptions where they've used some different colors, but pure white for all practical purposes, which is what I use. And then there are glasses that are clear with the LEDs around it. Now I was going to show you what that might look like. And it's kind of interesting. When you start the program, there's a routine already turned on. They give numbers and you get a manual with it that tells you what all the different programs do. And this one has a countdown. When you start, it counts down from 10 to 1 for you to get ready. And then when you're ready, it's going to kick on. And now, as you probably can see, there's white LEDs flashing around the perimeter of my eyepieces on these glasses. Now, what this allows you to do is to carry on other things like reading, studying, looking at the stars, I mean, anything you want to do. And so it will take you through a sequence. Now, if you're seeing the flashes, which I assume you are, you're going to notice that these change speed, or they alternate back and forth. They can be in synchrony, or one can be doing one frequency and one another. There's all kind of combinations you can put in, and each of those have a purpose. So these units are extremely good, work very well. And as I say, you normally would have earphones on because you would either be hearing the frequency beats from what you're seeing in the glasses, or you would be playing music, or you could do both. So that's how versatile they are. You can adjust the volume and the intensity of the light so that it's comfortable for you, but extremely good material. So that's the one that I have hooked up with the see-throughs. The other one I have hooked up and a set of earphones and so forth that you don't see through. You just sit down, close your eyes, and you utilize that. Now, these are extremely good and do a tremendous job about being an aid. Now, we have on our website Eldon Taylor out of the Northwest, who has special called Inner Talk CDs, which one ear it has, I think I mentioned that to you before, one ear is you're hearing what it is you want to change in normal speech. The other side is in reverse speech because the left side is going to the right hemisphere, which deals with images and speech in a different way and words and so forth. And the right ear going to the left hemisphere where we do our normal speaking and talking and so forth. And so these are very good on their own. But if you take those CDs and you mix it with a light sound machine, depending on what you want to do. If you want to learn to relax because you're highly stressed, then one of his own stress will do that, but be enhanced by activating more of the brain. The more of the brain you can bring into play. So the light brings in the visual cortex back in the occipital parts of the brain. The sound brings in the auditory parts of the brain. And then your thinking is activating the cortex. And especially we're liking to think you're going to the left prefrontals where all the joy and the good side is. And out of that, and not that the other side's bad, this can be critical and helpful at the right time. But if it's overused, it can be problematic. So we want to get you into the right state, and it can be extremely helpful in helping you get to a much higher level of health and stress-free awareness. The secret is flow. Now, many years ago, they had a book out called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle. and Zen and running, and Zen and all these things. Now, what did they mean by that? They meant you get into this flow state, and the flow state is like the mindfulness state, which is left prefrontal. All of a sudden, you're aware of everything, but you're not connecting the emotional circuits, because actually these left prefrontals shut down the amygdala, shut down the hippocampus, and all those bad old memories that are wanting to pop in, and all of the heavy emotions that are being triggered and so forth. All of that calms down because the left prefrontal calms that, whereas the right can get locked into a loop with it and reinforce it and make it worse. And so you get into that flow state, which means you're aware, you're moving, things are going well, but you're not stressed about it. You're aware of it, but it's not stressing you. That is extremely helpful. That's what the meditators achieve over the years when they get into learning meditation. It's nothing special. The Bible talks about meditate on the Word of God. That can be a focus point. So whatever it is that you can relate to, you can bring this all together. And so what I'm trying to do, I shouldn't say I'm trying, I'm doing it. We're making you aware of what can be done so that you can do all these for yourself. Okay, I'm believing that it's beginning to come together for you and make some sense. I've spent, as I say, years and years working on all this and learning all about it, and I would consider myself somewhat of an expert in the whole idea of personal development. I came from a little town in West Virginia, had no library in the town. The people were pretty much either had to work for somebody or had a little farm or gardens and whatever, and their knowledge of the world was rather limited. And it's interesting because very early I became aware, as I went to school and started going to the library and looking at some books which we did not have at home. My dad and mother were not readers. I think my mother could have. My dad was not unintelligent. He was extremely smart and very good with his hands. He could build anything. You told him what you want. He not only could build it, but build it well. But he had a lot of fears, and those fears kept him back from doing much. At some point, the work became so bad in this area that, as I say, it was a tiny little town. There really wasn't much of anything going on. And the only access I had to some books were when I had school, because there was none at home and no place to go get any. So any place I could scrounge out a book somebody was throwing away, I got hold of it to learn. And the day that I found out that because the work was so bad, my father's brother in northern Ohio said, there's a lot of work going on up here. If you're not doing too much there, you might want to come up. And so he did, and we did. And so the day that I found out we were leaving this little town to move to Ohio, which was just about an hour from Cleveland, Ohio, which represented a tremendous change from a little 2,000 or 3,000 populated town in West Virginia to the big city area, I was excited. My mother and sister cried for a year because they had to leave all the friends, relatives, and so forth. And my dad never could get really settled, which later drove him to a lot of other problems because of the fact that he had left where he grew up and his roots were back there and he couldn't make a living there. Well, he could have. He had an opportunity at one time. He always said he wanted to go back to farming, and so somebody offered to trade him a farm for the little house that we had in this little town. And my dad talked about it for ages, but was so scared about going out and making it on his own that he backed out and never did do it. So he ended up working in factories in Ohio and worrying himself almost to death the rest of his life. So at any rate, I looked forward to getting out of there. It was exciting to me, and the opportunities to me seemed unlimited, and I've never stopped. I mean, since then, everything is exciting. I've learned everything I can to not only better myself, but to give tools for other people to better themselves, because I think it's exciting to change, and I think it's exciting to grow, and I think it's exciting to expand your view of the world and understand more about more things, and things are less fearful. The one thing I've learned, the big thing is, the more you understand, the less fearful the world is. The less you understand, everything can be a potential threat because you don't understand. And so to me, this is exciting work, and At some point, I envision along the way soon a big center where a person can come in and over a period of a year or two, they can continue their life otherwise, but over a period of a year or two, they can go through a progression of expanding their capabilities, learning what their capabilities are, expanding their view of the world, having access to materials that they never knew existed or information they never knew existed. And there's a ton of it. I dare say that if we sat down for 2 or 3 days and talked, I could tell you stuff that would probably snap your garter. But nobody wears garters much anymore. But if you did, it could snap your garter. Not that I'm bragging, it's just that having exposed myself to information over the many years, I've learned a lot of things, and I found the world is not so scary. In fact, what I found, just the opposite, it makes sense. All of these things are not mysterious. They all come together. They all are part of this big whole, and when you understand the whole thing, it makes so much sense and feels so much better. And so that's what I've done, is in my pursuit is to really understand what's going on. And the more I've understood, the less fearful things are, until pretty soon it gets rid of a tremendous amount of stress, just because you're not fearful of, well, this could happen, and what are the chances of that happening, and how does that work? Well, gee, that seems so mysterious. Maybe there's something, maybe the devil's in it or something. I mean, it can do a lot of things to a lot of people's mind. And so the more you learn, the more you get to know yourself, the more you get rid of the baggage you're dragging along. And I always tell people that when we come out of childhood, we bring with us ourselves a big can full of garbage that we're toting on our back. And that can stay there your whole life, or you can become, number one, aware that it's there, and number two, you can start to shed the garbage out of it, so that one day you can throw away the garbage pail. You don't need it anymore. In fact, one of the therapists that I mentioned related to Gestalt therapy, Frederick or Fritz Perls, he wrote a book called In and Out of the Garbage Pail. But that's true. That's what we bring with us out of our childhood, is all this garbage. And there's very few people that ever get out of childhood without a pile of garbage on their back. The question is, are you going to get rid of the garbage? Or you just want to keep carrying it and adding more to it so that it gets even heavier and that it's overflowing. And I tell you what, the longer you carry a pail full of garbage, the stinkier it gets. And so it doesn't do a lot for you. And that's what the things that we're talking about are, ways you can, number one, become aware of the garbage. Number two, there's methods of starting to empty the garbage pail. And that's what you can do. And you're not going to do everything in a day or a week. Rarely does that ever happen. You know, those rare occasions where you get this tremendous breakthrough with somebody, and then all of a sudden everything is different thereafter. And that does happen occasionally, because sometimes there is this one major hurdle that the person has never gotten over, and if they can get over that hurdle, their whole life changes, and then it's automatic, just this after this after this after this. And so basically, we want you to be aware of all this. Be aware that there's a lot out there to get to. Now, this is one time I can put on my rose-colored glasses and say, yeah, that's right. Not because I'm blinded, but because the world actually does become rosier when you begin to get rid of all the scary things. You know, the goblins and all those things, you get rid of those, and then it's fun. Life can become fun. Dealing with other people can become fun, and the more people get rid of the garbage, the better it is. So we wouldn't have all the murders, we wouldn't have all of the stress and distress, and we wouldn't have all this garbage if we had people who knew themselves better and knew the world better and understood and were less fearful and didn't feel as threatened over everything and everybody. I'd say a lot of the big problems and even wars come about because of fears. Well, we better attack them before they attacked us, because they might be thinking about attacking us. But we don't know that for a fact, but it could be. So just to be safe, maybe we'll attack them first, and then we'll be okay. We'll get the upper hand. See, that's the kind of things that go on in people's minds. They may not just think of it that way, but you can tell by the response, that's what the principle that they're operating on. You hit him before he hits you. And you get prepared so that you're ready, and you put him on the defensive, or her on the defensive, as the case might be. So that's the light sound machines. Very helpful, can do a lot of things for you. The next big one that I became aware of many years ago was called the awakened mind concept. A a researcher in England by the name of C. Maxwell Cade many years ago became aware of meditators and people who were in certain heightened states of mind that weren't getting sick, that they had joy in their life. They didn't have all the phobias, they didn't have all the problems of emotions and so forth that everyone has. Not that they didn't have emotions, but it wasn't problematic for them. And so he wanted to see what was going on in their brain when that happened. So he developed some very specialized type of equipment called the Mind Mirror. The Mind Mirror was an EEG feedback machine in time, which means it doesn't have to stop, analyze the signal, and construct an image that goes up on the screen. It means immediately whatever's happening in your brain is showing up right on the EEG. But instead of looking for specific frequencies, it's going to display in kind of a bar graph, vertical column, the different ranges of frequencies and show how much of each of those frequencies are being generated at any given time. So when he measured these people who were in these awakened mind states, he saw that a specific pattern of frequencies would develop on this mind mirror. Along with it, he had used an GSR unit, which is a unit that measures reactions of the autonomic nervous system to things that are going on in the mind, whether conscious or unconscious. And the two of those he used together to study all these people. He put out a book called strangely, has to do with the American mind. I mean, the awakened mind. So he put out a book about it, and there was a lady in this country by the name of Anna Wise who went over, got intrigued about what he was doing, and spent time studying with he and his assistant over many years until she became extremely familiar with it, came back to the U.S. She started doing programs here, researched it even more, and came up with programs that people could get into to really awaken their mind to a higher group of levels, not just one. In other words, the original biofeedback, they used to say if your mind is in the alpha state, which is a relaxed aware state, then your body's going to be calm, and that's good for you. So people would use the EEG with a filter that only was telling you when you were producing those particular frequencies. But with the mind mirror, you were looking for a pattern of all the different frequencies. And so he knew what a good pattern was. She knew what a good pattern was. She researched it for years and years, and unfortunately, just in the last couple of years, I think, or year or two, she finally died. I think Cade has been dead for some time. So a lot of these people that I knew about, studied with, or studied about, and used the equipment have passed on to the next level. But I've decided to hang on here and aggravate people and provoke people and challenge people to become better, healthier, more emotionally content, and do a lot of good things for the world. So I'm hanging around for a while yet. Can't get rid of me that easy. But the awakened mind is very good. There was another researcher in California by the name of Valerie Hunt. She has a book out called The Infinite Mind, and she did a lot of studies that had to do with these frequencies and how they affected you, and got into some really heavy stuff. And so those books are going to be on the website that you can look at and can give you some additional information about all of this. I know I'm overloading you. I'm giving you a pile of stuff, but this whole thing about expanding yourself is so exciting to me. I want you to catch and pick up some of that excitement from me for yourself. So the heart math is the next one we want to talk more. And I've mentioned it a couple of times, but we want to talk a little bit more about it. And this, anyhow, I don't have a mind mirror here to show you, but now it's, instead of a separate instrument, there's a computer program, and it's going to display the EEG hookup, goes right into the computer and can display it also. So in that big center I'm talking about, we'd be using mind mirrors to help people develop at a certain stage along the way. I have an idea of taking people through step by step. When they read more, they learn more, they listen to things more, they watch DVDs more, they use the different types of equipment more, that we can take them through stages of development until they can become a very high-level functioning person, free of all the terrible stress, and able to do all kinds of creative things. Because I didn't mention with the light sound machines can open up the creative parts of the brain, because the creativity is there. Everybody has it. We just need to bring it out if that's what you want. So the tools are all there to do it. So we'll go to HeartMath out of California, a guy by the name of Doc Childers, and it's interesting, that is his first name, Doc, D-O-C. He's been doing all this research about the heart. Now, he picked a different way of measuring it or monitoring it called heart rate variability, which we mentioned earlier. It's abbreviated HRV, heart rate variability. And depending on the algorithms you apply with a computer, you can find out all kinds of things about somebody's health. Whether you want to know about the cardiovascular system, or you want to know about their autonomic nervous system, or if you want to know about them in general, there's a lot you can find out if you have the right interpretive software. And so there's some fancy software out there that we want to utilize when I'm setting up a stress program. I shouldn't say I am. I've been doing stress programs for a long time, but as a part of a center where people could come and learn how to deal with stress. This would tell you how stressed you are. It would tell you how fast you've aged in your body, because that is an algorithm you can pull off of this HRV signal that you get for heart rate variability signal, and you can monitor your physical condition and tell where you are, get a pretty good health status from that. Now, we have a machine here that uses heart rate variability called a DPA. It's a digital pulse wave analyzer, and it likewise can take information off of that same wave and analyze it using what's called an algorithm, a computer-type program that will give you certain information about the cardiovascular system, how well it's functioning. So it's a good way of doing it, and so Doc Childers started a long time ago with this HeartMath Institute doing all this research. It's been about 20 years now they've been researching the heart and what it can do, and out of that he's found that you could use it for things like depression, anxiety, the heart itself, blood pressure, all of these things that relate to the cardiovascular system. And anxiety, you can calm anxiety, you can bring up depression. All these things can be done with it. And he's developed all these programs. Now, as I say, there's going to be a click from our website to go to his information. And there's some free things you can download. But there's this M-Wave, which is the latest that he started out with another unit before. And he's evolved into this one called M-Wave. Now, the nice thing about the M-Wave is it's hooked into the computer, and it brings up on the screen, and you can do all these different programs. But if stress is a big issue, the little hand unit can be carried separately with you, and it displays this heart rate variability pattern on the screen. So if you're starting to feel uptight and very stressed, you stick your finger into it, it reads your heart rate variability, and as soon as you start thinking about being more calm, you can actually see the wave change. It goes from an incoherent heartbeat to a coherent heartbeat. Would stop more cardiovascular problems with people in this country and heart attacks than all of the statins and all this other stuff they tried to pour on you, which aren't going to help anyhow in my mind and in my opinion. And there's good reason, because we covered it when we covered cholesterol, why that's true. But with this, you can carry this little unit in your pocket, and if you're an executive or if you're working someplace where you get under a lot of stress, you can take a few minutes, put your finger in it, and calm your whole body down, and you'll know you've done it because it's biofeedback, getting back to what I said earlier about biofeedback. So it's a very good unit, and getting onto their site, you can find all the things they've done with it. They'll show you about all the research, and there's some other things which we don't even have time to get into that they've gotten into. There is a book called The HeartMath Solution you can get through Amazon from clicking on our site, which will give you the basics of some of the work they've done over the years and where they're headed. But one of the recent things they've done, and we're going to make this available on the website, you can get a free download, or you can get it from out there too, is a study they did using the M-Wave to help deal with the emotional issues of weight loss. And the people lost weight on it, but not only that, months later they were still keeping it off and feeling better and better. And they carry this little unit with them, and it monitoring their stress level or their incoherence of the heartbeat. And when they got the heartbeat back into the right state, it made big change. Now, part of it has to do with what you think and what you say, And I had a book that I was going to bring called Your Body Believes Everything You Say, but it believes everything you think too. And so that's part of the process, is learning to talk healthy and to think healthy. And you can see right away what it's doing to you on this little instrument. There's a screen on it that actually shows you the pattern. And when you know how to use that, you can use it, as I say, for anxiety, depression, stress in general, memory, concentration, weight loss, all kinds of things. And so that I've made a part of my weight loss program I told you that I've developed. Now there's all other kinds of tools out there. I mean, there's so many that I don't even know where to start, and there's no way we have time to do it, or we'd have another program, another session, another broadcast to get through all this. So I'm just going to tell you that there's some called the emotional code or the emotion code. There's a unit called the brain tuner that can do a lot of things for you. Extracranial stimulation, the neurophone, the echophone. I told you about Alan Taylor, some of his material, which is extremely good. He's probably the expert in the world on using recordings and videos to help people improve themselves. I was going to say that in the clinic that I've used a variant of the glasses and something called EMDR, which we mentioned, which was eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, can be done by moving something in front of the eyes and causing the person to have to move their eyes back and forth, which frees up things that are frozen or locked in, like post-traumatic stress type problems. But one of those practitioners after years found that if you listen to music that goes first to one ear then the other back and forth, it does the same thing at a faster rate. In fact, they call it EMDR at the speed of light or something like that. And that moves it even faster, and so I incorporate that in something I have. The unit I have is, they found out years ago that when you talk, your vocal cords are controlled by your brain nervous system, and the information you put on it modulates that set of vocal cords. Therefore, what's going on to you emotionally comes through on the vocal cords. Now they've called that voice stress analysis part of a lie detector type system, because when you lie, a particular type of stress shows up on the vocal cords, and so they could use that for lie detection. I have a unit developed by someone who developed space technology and also was into meditation and all of that. A unit called, was originally called the Vocal 360, now it's called VSA, Voice Stress Analysis. It uses a computer program that you talk into it, and it analyzes your voice, breaks it down into the individual groups of frequencies. There's 12 different groups that have to do with different emotional states. And so then the computer generates a treatment program of frequencies that you're wearing the glasses that are flashing them in random patterns so that your brain is kind of being freed up. You're listening to the MDR music back and forth. The frequencies that are corrective or neutralizing are fed into this chair you sit in, and the frequencies go through the whole body to every cell of the body. Now remember, we mentioned earlier that Candace Pert's work said that every cell of the body is involved in the emotional issues to begin with, number one, and number two, the memory of it. In other words, the molecules of emotion store all this information throughout your whole body. So every cell is affected by it. So what this machine does, this device I use, is that it feeds that back into you with neutralizing frequencies, and there's a principle of electronics why that works, that neutralizes the negative emotions attached to these various emotional frequency patterns. And so therefore the person can get rid of this stuff even when it happened in the first 3 years of life, a la Clancy McKenzie, the psychiatrist who talked about delayed post-traumatic stress disorder or disease or disturbance, however you want to say it. It actually erases the emotions, the negative emotions, out of those so that you can function. In other words, they don't bug you anymore. Kind of like the Roger Callahan's tapping, emotional freedom technique, thought field therapy, where you tap the energies to help, while you're thinking of this problem, to help free up the negative emotions stuck to it. Well, this unit does it automatically. You sit in the chair. We've had people that for years, like 30 years of their life, 40 years of their life, were non-functional. And in about 4 to 6 sessions, we can wipe that out using the VSA. Very, very powerful stuff. The first time I ever heard about it and I sat down and experienced it myself, I said, I've got to have one of those in my office. And I haven't been disappointed. It helps free you up by erasing those negative energies that you keep storing back in the unconscious and taking a lot of your energy to hold back. And at the same time, since it is being depressed, it's distorting because it's through the whole body, and it's distorting various things in the body and therefore leading you to physical or emotional illness. Tremendously effective. And so that's one of the things that I use in the office. I also have a newer version of that called now Evox, which is kind of similar, uses the voice analysis. The way of doing the therapy is slightly different, still gets down to energies and frequencies and so forth. I also have been using psychoenergetics, which was developed by 2 doctors out of Switzerland, husband and wife team, doctors Bonus and Bonus, and they found that over the years, they were medical doctors treating people with all these problems, but they kept being aware of all this emotional undertone. So they finally changed the whole way they approach. They call it psychoenergetics, and they use actually homeopathic combinations for everybody, and found that not only did their emotions get better, but their physical problems got better. So anyhow, we have that available and utilize that, and that's what it's called, psychoenergetics, and it works extremely well also. So I've known for years and years about the psychological, emotional, physical connection, and now we're being inundated with studies and books and so forth verifying what some of the pioneers have known for years and years and years. And it's very effective. And it doesn't cost you a fortune, and you don't have to be psychoanalyzed for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and you don't have to go to psychotherapy 2 or 3 years, and you don't have to take psychoactive drugs. So I'm just telling you what your options are. You're not stuck, you're not corralled in, and you're not locked up, and you're not imprisoned. The way out is not so expensive and not so difficult if you really want to change. And of course, the one thing that's incurable are attitudes. So if you've got a bad attitude and you're getting too much benefit from your problem, of course, nobody is going to help you. Not even psychoactive drugs, nothing, because we can either override. I told you about the studies that have been done related to placebo, that you gave students very powerful amphetamines that revs up the nervous system in the brain like crazy, and tell them that it's a very powerful sedative like Valium, and they take it, they actually get drowsy and relaxed and want to fall asleep. At least a high percentage of them did, like 40+% did. So that means that their brain, emotions, belief system overrode the powerful effect of amphetamines that under normal conditions would have somebody buzzing off the walls in the ceiling, and overrode all that and actually sedated them because they believed that it was a powerful sedative. So, you know, when we think, oh, well, we just have to have those drugs. No, we have to have a change, as Zig Ziglar used to say, a checkup from the neck up. We have to have a change of thought. And if you don't want to get better, there is no treatment that will get you better because you can override it. I don't care what it is. You can override it. And that's how powerful placebo is. And nocebo. Nocebo is the opposite of placebo. Placebo means to get better because you think something. Nocebo says you get sicker because you think it. And if you don't believe that's true, take somebody that you're with every day and have 2 or 3 people tell them a few times over the day, is there something wrong with you? You don't look very well. And see how they're feeling by the end of the day. It was nice to be with you again. Don't forget our broadcast every week. New broadcast goes up at 4 o'clock on Sunday. That broadcast will be there 24 hours a day, and through the following Thursday night, you can go directly to it by going to freedoocast.com/mindyourhealthcast if you want to go directly to the streaming site, or you can go to our Mind Your Healthcast site and click from there, and it will take you right to the broadcast. It was nice to be with you again. I hope I've given you some things to ponder. and maybe make some decisions about. Do you really want to be well, or are you getting too much gain from what's bugging you already? And you certainly can get a lot of sympathy from people, or until they finally get tired of it, then they just avoid you. But it's your decision. So there it is. I've given you things to get you going. If you're interested, we will have a program. Let us know. You can call, you can email, you can go on the forum site and make a comment, a request, whatever. But it's going to be available. And for those who want to make change, it's there. It was nice to be with you again. We'll see you next time.